Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole for April 19th, 2022. This evening, we're going to be discussing the proposed charter, specifically Articles 1 and Articles 2 of that proposed charter. We are joined by Councilor Gould, Councilor Rosnell, Councilor Manning Martin, Councilor Peach, Councilor O'Neill, Councilor Turco, and Assistant City Solicitor Brian Barrett. Councilor McGinn is joining us via Zoom. I'm anticipating a couple other councilors to be joining us. They had some scheduling conflicts. Just a few things I just wanted to kind of housekeeping portions of this. One of the questions that came out of the last subcommittee meeting, committee of the whole meeting on this particular issue was regarding like the threshold for votes. Attorney Barrett had put together a memo. Essentially, within the committee of the whole, any amendments that are proposed would be a majority vote to make the edits to the proposed charter, and then the actual charter to be approved after it comes out of committee and goes to the full council to go to the legislature would require a 2/3 majority to initiate that. So within the subcommittee, it will be a majority vote for edits, and then once we go to the full council, when it's reported out for review of the full council to go to the legislature as part of the home rule petition process, it would be a 2/3 majority to make that happen. The second item, just to discuss, is how we'll be handling the review process this evening. So part of the packet, I included the amendments that were made and the motions that were made from 3 years ago. That was for just reference portions for councilors, so that in case you might have remembered a motion you made a couple years ago, you could use that. Those are not incorporated currently. We would have to make those motions again to make those edits. And as we go through the actual document, essentially we'll just go page by page, asking if anybody has any edits or discussion points. If none, we'll move to the next page and then discuss any edits or questions that people might have. Part of the process, if edits are made, Allison will make the edits, and then those will be part of the packet for the next meeting to ensure that those edits are correctly made. She'll do that in conjunction with Attorney Barrett, so that we can reconcile after each meeting those edits, so that they incorporated with the intention that the council has made at that time. Any questions on that process? Councilor Rosnell?
Thank you, Mr. President. One question I have is, so we'll make these edits as we go through the charter. At the finality of our review, will we then go back and review it one further time, or will we be able to comment on any edits that we've made previously? So, for instance, let's say we get to later on in our charter review and we're noticing something that we want to change that we've already kind of voted on. Do we have time to go, or do we have the ability to go back and re-edit?
I would discourage that. I mean, we'd have to have a final vote to take it out of committee. What I would say is, and the reason why we're not going to report out our efforts as we move forward is because if we do if a decision is made by the council for a portion of the charter that would impact something that we've already gone over, I think obviously we would want to review it at that time. My thought would be, as we move forward, unless there's something consequential that would arise as we get to that point, we will have a final meeting to report this out of committee, and ultimately it will go before the full council for that 2/3. If somebody wishes to make a motion at that point, I mean, it's up to the councilors, because we would be reviewing the full document at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Turco?
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually had the exact same question as you, and the reason why I had that is looking through some of the definitions, such as, definition 19, recall. The definition is there, but I don't know what a recall election entails. So, I may be in favor in section 102 of leaving the definition of recall here, but later on when I read through the actual procedure for a recall, if it's in fact in there, then, it may change the way that definition should be, placed in section 1. So that's why I would like the option And I know, we're trying to move forward on this without too much back and forth, but occasions will arise where we need to revert back to a previous section and make a slight change due to a decision we make later on through the document. So I don't know how to, I guess as council president, you can kind of make that determination as we go, but there should be some sort of option for us to revert back if need be.
I agree, Counselor. We will be voting at some point on the full document with the edits. We would be able to, like I said, if there's some sort of changing, and obviously if you edit something in Article 5 that's mentioned in Article 1 or 2, you'd want to make sure that those things rhyme. And that's part of the discussions I've had with both Allison and Attorney Barrett as we've been kind of planning for this to ensure that there is no interruption on those two things, so the terms stay the same. So any other questions? Councilor Peach?
Thank you, Mr. President. Throughout this process, do you have a plan for public comment? I just know that there may be some public comment that sways our decision on certain issues in the charter. I don't know if you've already set out that plan.
I would encourage, we can receive written correspondence, I think would be the best way. But at the end, when we're reviewing the final document, at that point, there is a portion of this that would require, that there would be a public hearing at the council level. So once it gets to the council, you would have a public hearing. It has to be posted. There's all sorts of requirements for that, because it is a home rule petition. So we would follow that process and take written correspondence as they come in. I would, when it comes to part of the debate, let's say, of the subcommittee, I think the written correspondence would be the best to keep it part of the record. That's just my view at this point. If councilors had a different opinion on that, I'd be willing to listen, but seeing tonight, we're going to deal with Article 1 and Article 2. We'll see how it goes, and we can go from there. But yes, there's definitely going to be public, and ultimately the public will be voting on this. So they'll have multiple says on that. Okay, all right. So I'm going to share my screen. If there's no other questions, let me see here. All right, we're going to begin this evening with Article 1, Incorporation, Short Title, and Definitions. So my plan is to just essentially go page by page. I don't plan on reading line by line. So beginning on page 1, page 2. It's page 2. Sections 1.1 is incorporation. Sections 1.2 is short titles. Sections 1.3 is division of powers. And sections 1.4 are powers of the city. Do any councilors have any questions on this or any discussion? So on page 2 we're on. Any councilors? Councilor McGinn, you can, I'm taking a look at you in case you get your hand up, so I am on the Zoom as well, so, or you can just speak if you have a question. Just wanted to make sure.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, so no questions on page 2? All right, we'll move on to page 3. This is sections 1.5, construction. Sections 1.6, intergovernmental relations. Sections 1.7, definitions, on page 3. Any councilors with any questions or remarks on this? All right. Going to move on to page 4. This is just a continuation of the definitions. It's page 4. Any questions from any councilors? Okay. I'm going to move on to page 5. Again, this is just another continuance of definitions. Any questions or comments from councilors on page 5? All right, seeing none, moving on to page 6. So we'll go with the top portion if anybody has any questions on the last of the definitions, and then we'll move into Article 2, which is the legislative branch. This is on page 6. All right, seeing no other question, Counselor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's just along the lines of comments that Councilor Turco mentioned with the definition of, I apologize, on the bottom of page 5, recall. I get the general concept, recalling a public official or whatnot, but I was not sure if that's defined anywhere, and that's something that I'd like to see is, does that mean that you need this many signatures, or maybe it's done by mass general law? Just curious.
That's actually going to be in that section of elections when we get to that portion. But again, obviously, we can go back to this if we change something that's going to be consequential to that definition that we see here. But that's the definition. That's the definition of that term for within the charter for the entire document. But just to keep us in order, I was just going page by page. So if there's something, we can always come back to it. But any other questions on the rest of the definitions? All right. So now we're going to move on to Article 2. Yeah, we'll just move on. We're going to just move on. So it'll be Article 2, the legislative branch. So this is page 6. The first section is composition, term of office, and eligibility. So this is going to start off on page 6, lines 9 through 21. Anybody have any questions or comments? Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one clarification I needed was line 19, term of office. The term of office for, I'm sorry, it's actually, the one in question is page 7, so I'll hold off on that till page 7.
Any other questions for page 6? All right, well, let's go on to page 7. I'll just read off what the sections are, and then Councilor Turco, I'll hand it over to you. We have, it's a subsection is C, eligibility, and then we have section 2.2, president and vice president election term and powers, and then there's a subsection A and B, and this is page 7. Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President. So yes, line 17 on page 7, where it says, President and Vice Presidents who shall serve for one-year terms. Where we may run into a problem there is if you revert back to the definition for year on page 6, section line 7, it says a year is defined as a calendar year, but as you know, your term as council president extends beyond the calendar year. So I think we need to clarify that because it could potentially leave us with days without a council president. So if your term were to expire on December 31st, January 1st, 2nd, the 3rd might be the first Monday of January, the 4th may be the first Monday of January. It would leave us 4 days without a council president and open us up to, God forbid something happened to the mayor or you needed to call an emergency meeting as to question who would be the council president in that term. So I think we need to just add to that. And my thought is to possibly shall serve one-year terms. I just want to word it till the organization of government. If we add ending one-year term, ending at the organization of city government, maybe that covers us for that period.
Yeah, I wish I have the term somewhere. Hold on one second. The constitution of a new council, essentially what it is, or the organization of a new.
Or upon the election of a new city council president, however you deem, but. Yeah, I like the organization of city government.
Councilor Turco?
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer to go with until the organization of city government. And I'll make that in the form of a motion to add that to line 17 after a one-year term commencing with the ending with
The formation of the organization of government.
city government.
Yep.
That's fine. Yeah, that'll work.
Councilor Gould. Motion.
No, nothing on that motion. I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Any other councilors on discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache. Turco.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. Along the same lines as Councilor Turco's motion, at the beginning of Section A, or Section 2.2, Part A, where it says, as soon as practical after the councilors-elect have been qualified following each regular city election, just whereas we do a government organization on an annual basis, not only following elections, if we amend that in some way to say following each city government organization instead of referencing the election that only happens every 2 years.
Thank you, Councilor Peach. There's a reference point later in the document to addressing the issue that we had when I first got on the council, which was that we were basically had to be sworn in on New Year's Day. I believe it was in our current charter. I think it's the first Monday after that. So we can use some of that language to. I think that language addresses this because that identifies the organization of government, and I believe that's in. I want to say it's in Article 8, but I don't have it right now because we're in 7. But yeah, in Section 10.9 they reference it, so it's actually in Section 10.9 is a reference point. Yes, Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I did look at that section. So this is for our oath of office, which is only set to happen after each regular election. So with the organization, with this new charter, if we wanted to move away from the tradition of having an organization of government every year, as we currently do, if we, if we defined it separately, or if we just decided we were only going to do our organization of government after each election, and then in our city council rules, define the terms of the president and how they're elected.
So but what you're talking about is I'm trying to clarify what you're looking for. So you're looking to specify when we would do the organization of government each year?
Yeah, so in this section 2 that we're talking about, it's saying as soon as practical following each regular city election and as provided, referencing section 10.9, that's when we will organize and vote for a president. But so it's contradicting to say that we're going to do this after every election and then the president's going to be elected every year, because we only have an election every 2 years.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Counselor, but when I was reading the minutes, I think that as soon as practicable was dealing with the non-election year organization, and that was dealing with the actual scheduling of the meetings by either the school committee or the city council. But I mean, if we want to add some language in there to specify it, that's fine. What I would always caution is this is definitely giving us some leeway on scheduling, but if you want to make a motion on something, we can talk about it.
It's not necessarily the scheduling, it's just the verbiage of we're doing this after each regular election when we're actually going to do it every year. So the charter, if as written, I'm interpreting, and I'll refer to the legal counsel, that this would read as every other year, following every city election, which is every 2 years, we will get together as soon as practical, be sworn in, and vote for a president and a vice president who will serve 1-year terms, which to me contradicts, because our city elections are not annual.
Election of the council president will be once a year is what you're getting at, during when we organize.
Unless you want to serve 2-year term.
No, I'm good. 1 year's fine. So do you have a motion that you want to make on this, Counselor? Because I just want to make sure we're identifying what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so in the form of a motion, I'd move to strike each regular city election and replace with each city organization, whatever we termed it in Councilor Turco's. Every organization, each annual organizational meeting of city government. Thank you, Counselor.
We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion from councils on that motion? Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the motion, I'm sorry, could you repeat what we're striking specifically?
Councilor Peach, when you do it, can you go like page 7, line, whatever, by the numbers?
Yeah, through you to Councilor McGinn. On page 7, line 15, striking each regular city election and adding each annual organizational meeting of the city, or something like that.
I thought that's what I heard. So thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilor Peach. So would it be simpler, Councilor Peach, to just strike strike the whole thing as soon as practical after the councilor-elect have been qualified? Because to your point, that only makes sense every other year, as provided in section 10.9. That again only makes sense every other year. So if you just struck everything up to that point and just said annually at the organization of government meeting, the members of the city council shall elect from its members, would that be simpler and address?
Councilor Peach,
I think that is a great idea, Counselor.
would you like to amend your motion, Councilor Peach?
Thank you, Mr. President. I amend the motion to strike on page 7, line 14 and 15 through 10.9 on line 16, and just have the sections start with at each annual government organizational meeting, continue, the members of the city council shall elect.
So Councilor Peach, you want to strike line one more time, just because I want to make sure Allison has it myself. And you'll just let us know what we're going to strike, and then if you want to read the section so that we're all on the same page. So the strike, and then what you want the amended section to read as.
Read what we're striking, and then also read the
Then just state
amendment.
what is proposed to be.
Okay, so I move to strike lines 14, 15, and the beginning of 16 of page 7 that say, as soon as practical after the councilor-elects have been qualified following each regular city election as provided in section 10.9, and then replace that with at the annual organization of city government, the members of the city council shall elect among its members.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion on the floor. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Councilors Gould,
Yes.
Rozignol,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Peach,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gamache,
Yes.
Turco, Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Councilor Gamache. I'm sorry, Councilor Gould, then Councilor Gamache. I apologize, Councilor
Is
Gould.
that okay? Thank you, Mr. President. A term that jumps out at me, and I'm sure it's probably the same for all of us, is the phrase vice president shall be elected. We don't do that. I don't know if there's any will to do that, so if not, I suggest we strike it.
Councilor, I'd entertain that, and then we could say we would strike it from the document, because it's actually mentioned down the road, and we can get rid of that now, so that we're not dealing with this further down. So we'll strike the position of vice president from the, we have some language that we had used before that I think works, and it's move to strike, and this is just proposed language, move to strike the words vice president from section 2.2 and from the charter the proposed charter document as a whole.
Moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor Gould. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilors Gould,
Yes.
Rozignol,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
Yes?
Peach,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
All right, we're still on page 7. Any other questions or comments from councilors on page 7? Councilor Manny Martin.
Mr. Chairman, did we, on our previous motions, where is it? Powers and duties. Did we offer to change it in a motion, say that the city clerk at the direction of the president on line 20B, 21B? So I think I'll make that motion again. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's the, 1, 2, 3.
It's moved to amend 2.2B by striking president, inserting city clerk at the discretion of
Yes.
the city council president.
Yeah, I'll make that motion again. Thank you.
Okay, you heard that motion from Councilor Manning Martin. And again, this was the motion that was made, if you want to refer to this, the same language from 2 years ago, where it's by striking president and inserting city clerk at the direction of the city council president in sections 2.2. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilors Gould, Rozignol,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Peach,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gamache, Turco,
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
All right. We're still on page 7. Councilor Turco.
Just looking at one of the motions previously made from the previous discussion, and about the ward counselor who removes from the ward in which the counselor was elected. So there was a motion to strike that, which passed 6-4. And I believe I voted against striking that the first time, but in hindsight, I was thinking about that tonight, and I thought about whether it would be proper for us to take a seat or to remove somebody from their seat if they had a family issue, let's say a separation, where one had to temporarily leave the residence, where maybe there was a fire and they had to seek an alternate place to live for a period of time through no fault of their own, or even a financial issue where their house was foreclosed upon and they temporarily had to leave the ward. I mean, I'm kind of indifferent toward this, but I just wanted to bring those issues up because things happen in people's lives where a ward council may be forced to temporarily leave and not hold that address any longer. And I just, wanted to open it up for discussion more so than anything.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. Councilor Manny Martin and then Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Councilor Turco. I'm glad you brought that up because if you read, we may not get to it tonight, but just as long as whatever we do decide that it's consistent throughout, because I know there's some language in there that to me appear to be different in handling of school committee members or at-large elected offices. It seemed to be different throughout this. So just in moving forward, we keep that in mind, that whatever we do decide, that it's consistent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Manny Martin. Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think Councilor Turco brings up some good points. I think as far as a fire or a temporary removal from a residency, I think you still maintain your residency in the ward. But I know the council previously moved to remove this from the charter. Just to put out to discussion, the thought process behind putting this in the charter is special elections are removed from this charter. There's no special elections if this passes as written. And primarily that's because the cause of a special election is pretty rare, and the cost of a special election is pretty expensive. So this is, as cities move towards modern charters, that's really how cities have been moving. This is in here where a ward councilor leaves their ward but remains a resident of their city. The thought process is they were elected by residents of their ward. They understand their ward and their issues. And I, as a voter, would prefer to have someone that I elected who still lives in Peabody represent me than have them removed from office and the council gets to appoint someone that they want to be on the council. So that was the thought process behind it, if anyone else has any concerns, but I would be in favor of keeping this in the charter.
Thank you, Councilor Beach. Councilor O'Neill, and then Councilor Rosendahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. People are bringing up good points. I think the only word that would concern me it would be on, once again, page 7, line 6. Talks about, starts on 5, but if a ward councilor or council at large removes from the city during the council's term, that office, I'd be concerned about leaving in the word shall, that office shall immediately be deemed vacant. Yeah, I probably would move to strike the word immediately. Just, who's to define immediately? Just, the office shall be deemed vacant rather than saying immediately. If someone, to Councilor Turco's comment that there's a fire or something like that, just more on my cynical side that someone, anyways, I would move to strike the word immediately on page 7, line 6. So moved.
So you're making that in the form of a motion, Councilor? All right, so we're striking on page 7, line 6 immediately is the motion. Any discussion from councilors on that motion? Councilor Gamache.
Through you to Mr. Barrett, is there anything that would prohibit the council from delaying and delaying and delaying to keep that member on the board, on the city council? And I'm only throwing that out there. There are certain circumstances which we as a council will work with, i.e. a fire forces him to move to his mother's house in Danvers or wherever. But if somebody should move from the city of Peabody and have no real reason other than an emergency to move, I think we should at least have some, not immediately, but we should have some type of time frame to allow the council to take this issue up and not continue it, to allow that individual to remain on the city council, even though on their own admission moved out of the city. And I think we should have the ability to say within a 30-day period, the council shall act to remove that elected official based on the bylaws of the city. I think we're keeping it wide open if we don't put some type of end date or time period, because as you know, things in government work slowly, and who's to say that we may not take it up for 6 months? So I think I'm throwing it out there to our council to try to come up with a time period which would not allow somebody to remain as a councilor who is not living in the city of Peabody willfully. I mean, there are extenuating circumstances which the council will take into consideration as to what can be done. But I don't believe that we should have the ability to just a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and allow that individual to stay as a representative of the city council not living in the city of Peabody. So I'd entertain a thought from our council. Thank you.
Through the chair, I don't think the removal of the word immediately really causes any change here, because you're looking at once the person removes from the city, it shall be deemed vacant. So to me, those are the same things. That's immediate. once someone removes themselves from the city, I guess that's the question. It's a question of intent. What is remove? If it's a temporary removal due to unforeseen circumstances, then clearly you're not going to strip the person of their office. But if they move their residence, change their voting, you only have one domicile. So if they establish a domicile in Lynn or Salem or some other place, why would there be any time lag? It should be an immediate vacancy. So if someone removes themselves, it's a vacant seat.
Okay,
Now, if
that
you
was
wanna
that was
put
the clarification I was looking for,
Yeah,
to make
I
sure
can-
that we didn't meander with this thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion on to strike immediately. Councilor O'Neill, did you have a question? I'll move to Councilor Peach, and Councilor Manning Martin also had raised their hands.
I don't have a question, but I guess just on the motion, I would just point councils to the end of the paragraph, at line 10, the city council shall determine whether a city council is removed from the city. So that'll be up to their discretion. I look at it from just the standpoint of, once again, if there's a situation, unforeseen circumstances, it could be nefarious situations. Someone says, they're out of the city because they're in a hospital getting, I don't know, a leg treatment for 4 months. Someone says, let's get rid of them. So anyways, I'd still like to keep the motion.
All right, we have a motion on the floor, but you took the words out. I was trying to point to the council would have a say in this. It's under, so at the end, it determine whether the city council is removed from the city. It's line 10. So the council has the point I would make in this, the council is not, it's not one of these situations where it's like the person has a GPS and they're gone or something like that. This would, Councilor Manning Martin.
On that discussion, is it the word removes and removed that's causing the problem? It's such a strange word to use, and it's leaving interpretation open. Did they intentionally move to a new domicile? Did they temporarily get displaced? The word removes, it seems to me, to be the problem. And then it's wrapped up later in what was just pointed out as the city council shall determine whether a city councilor has removed from the city. The whole thing's odd now that we kick it around like this. So I think better language, more direct language should maybe button this up. I don't know if legal language. You see what I'm saying?
It's ambiguous, the word remove, because it could be a temporary thing, as you guys have been discussing. If you were to say permanently changes their residence outside of the city, so it shows some intent that...
I like that you use the word domicile, because that was very, that's exact, rather than if you remove from the city. If you change a domicile, then, as you said, you have to register and you have to pay taxes elsewhere, reflective of your domicile. So something like that, I think, is a good suggestion.
Thank you, Councilor Manning Martin. Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. To that point of the word removed, it is defined in our definition section, and it uses the word domiciled. And I think the intent was to use language that's consistent with Mass General Law, and it's defined at the beginning of our charter, removed from city, removed from ward. And it says when a person ceases to be domiciled within the territorial limits of the city or a ward. So I think that sums it up.
I would actually argue, one thing I would say is we could actually first, and this is a tact we can take going forward, is when we find some of these definitions that are found within the actual document, we can cite them as the definition, so that some of these questions can be answered. But so we do have a motion on the floor about striking immediate. Councilor McGann.
Mr. President, actually, Councilor Peach made the point I was going to make, so I think I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. So we do have a motion to strike immediately from line 6 on page 7. Is there any further discussion on striking that? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilors Gould.
No.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
No.
Peach.
No.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
No.
Turco,
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-4.
So it's 5-4. All right, so we'll strike immediately, but the, we'll see that what we did touch on was the council shall determine whether a city councilor has been removed from the city, so there's a mechanism to address that issue. We are still on page 7. Any other discussion on any items? Great, by the way, this was a great thing to bring up and discuss and vet, so thank you, Councilor Turco. Any other discussion on page 7? We're going to move on to page 8. All right, page 8. We have carryover from the section 2.2, which is the president, and we struck vice president. So it's president election term and powers, starting on page 7, line 12, and then it carries over into page 8, ending at line 7, and then we move on line 8 of page 8 is section 2.3 is prohibitions, and it's subsection A is line 9, which is holding other city positions, and then subsection B, line 18, interference with administration. Councilor Manning Martin.
Thank you. If I may, a question to Councilor Peach. If you could explain the intent or the rationale behind the section 2.3 prohibitions B, interference with the administration. No city council or any member of the city council shall give orders or direction to any any employee of the city appointed by the mayor, either publicly or privately. And I ask what the intent was because we're the legislative branch, and the mayor is the executive branch. That's clear throughout our charter and our government. So we as a city council, even collectively or individually, don't have that authority to order any city department to do anything. So to me, it just seemed kind of obvious and somewhat gratuitous to put that in our charter so officially. We don't have the authority to do that. And I don't know of any councilors in my tenure that have done that. I know we can call department heads and ask for information or ask for assistance and things, but we don't have the authority to order anyone to do that. So if you could tell me what the intent of the commission was to put that in there. Just to me, it jumps out as gratuitous and, unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Councilor Manning. The intent of the charter as a whole and the sections in the legislative and executive branch are to clearly define the roles of each. Looking at other charters for other cities that are similar in size and makeup as ours, this is very nice language, I'll say. I agree that I believe there was some edits a few years ago with the previous council where we all talk to department heads and different employees of the city when we're looking for guidance and help to get something accomplished for our constituency. So I understand the hesitation of putting it on paper that we're defining a line of what we can and can't do, but the point is to say this is what we can do as a legislative branch, and this is what the mayor can do as the executive branch leader. It's in charters. There's also, and I can't speak to this, so our charter will go to the Attorney General for review to make sure that it's all legal throughout. There are certain things that have to be in charters. I don't know whether this is one of them. So this was a suggestion from the guidance of the UMass Boston folks. It's in every other major city charter that I read in review for this. So, and this is very nice, soft language comparatively. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
It does, but I suppose if it was not as nice, it would have slapped me in the face a little harder. But to me, it just seems unnecessary, gratuitous, and somewhat petty to me. But if it is required by law to be in there, then that's a different story. So that's where I'm at with that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Manning Martin. Councilor McGinn, then Councilor O'Neill, and Councilor Gamache.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think through kind of woven into Councilor Manning Martin's comments there, she mentioned we can't give orders, but that we do contact these departments from time to time, whether to make them aware of things or ask for help, whatever. And so I was very concerned when we last looked at this about the words or directions, because what communications get misconstrued as, or directions. And I just don't think every time a councilor contacts an employee of the city, department head, or whatever, that there should be some concern that that's in some way a charter violation. So I would move to make that motion here again tonight, which would be to move to strike from section 2.3B the words or directions from line 19, page 8. So moved.
All right, you heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor Gamache.
By, my interpretation would be by removing the words or directions. It's a fine line of interpretation or directions. Specifically, as Councilor Manning Martin pointed out, this is a document that says what can and can't be done by council members. And it's explicit. And it specifically tells you the boundaries of what you can and cannot do. And I'll go back 30 years when Pete Terigian was the mayor. There was a non-direct rule that if you wanted to speak to a department head, you had to go through the mayor. And over the years, that kind of get, pushed aside, and we all decided to contact the directors or themselves to give them our take on what's going on. But I think if you delete the word directions, if you take that out, you're basically allowing us to do certain things that the charter says we can't do. In other words, we can call up a department head and give them our advice, but we can't give them direction to do it. And I think that fine line should remain so that we don't convolute the situation that we have. We know we can't give them orders. We can't call up a department head and say, do this. But we can call up a department, we shouldn't, but we do, call up a department head and ask them to consider doing something. But you can't just arbitrarily take out that term directions because it's that fine line. And I think that to remain in the charter gives an understanding that if you violate this, there would be repercussions. And I just think that this entire piece of item B should remain as it is collectively, and I would support leaving that as is. So, thank you.
Councilor O'Neill, then Councilor Manning Martin.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the motion, I'd support it, but I would actually amend it to get rid of the interference with administration. As we already went through, page 2, line 10, section 1-3, division of powers, already says explicitly, the legislative branch shall never exercise any executive power. That's talking about exactly. I think it's overkill to then parse words into directions. It's as simple as saying, if I contacted the Department of Public Services, there's a pothole on, in front of 634 Lowell Street, could you please have that filled? That's a direction. I think we're we're making this more complicated, and I think, once again, it already talks about division of powers. I would remove, I'd actually amend the motion and remove interference with administration in total. So moved.
Well, Counselor, it's one suggestion, and if you want to make a motion to amend a motion, because these are two separate things, would you be willing to hold off on your motion until we go through this one, and then we can come back?
Absolutely, sure.
Instead of having an amendment to an amendment, just for the sake of clarity. Counselor Manning Martin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I concur with Councilor O'Neill 100% on this one, as he, again, has pointed out the difference between the legislative and the executive. We don't have control over those things. The mayor does, and when you use the term, Councilor Gamache, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councilor Gamache, what are the repercussions? There's no repercussions for a councilor if they were to call up someone and start, a department head and start barking at them to do this, do that. There's no repercussions for the counselor. But should the department head listen to and do that, contrary to the wishes of the mayor, there'd be repercussions for that department head. They don't do it because the repercussions would come from the mayor, that they're not doing what the mayor wishes and they're listening to a single counselor. So there are no repercussions for the council. And again, I don't think anybody here does that. I'm not aware that that's a problem here. So again, I would concur with Councilor O'Neill to just strike the whole thing. Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to strike or directions in line 19 of page 8. Councilor McGinn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll withdraw my motion in favor of the motion to strike the language in its entirety and reserve the right to come back.
Councilor McGinn, just to clarify, your motion is to strike lines 18 through 20 on page 8?
No, Mr. President, I'll withdraw my motion in favor of the motion by Councilor O'Neill.
Okay, Councilor O'Neill, could you give us your motion?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd move to strike on page 8, line 18, I guess it's section 2-3B, interference with administration, remove the entire section. So moved.
All right, so just to clarify, Councilor O'Neill's motion on page 8 is to strike lines 18, 19, and 20. Is that correct, Councilor O'Neill?
Correct, thank you.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Counselor Gould.
No.
Rossignol.
No.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Peach.
No.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
No.
Turco.
No.
Melville.
No.
Motion fails.
All right, so we're still on page 8. Councilor McGinn?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I would move to strike from section 2-3B the words or directions from line 19, page 8. So moved.
Here, the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Counselor Gould.
No.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
No.
Turco.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-2.
Okay, any other discussion on page 8? Yeah. Oh, it's Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. It was brought up by the previous council. Much of this document refers to a 2/3 vote versus a number of members, and on line 14, we refer to it as 8 members of the city council. So through you to Attorney Barrett, I I'm not clear on what the two-thirds vote is in the state of Massachusetts. Is it two-thirds of the present members? Is it two-thirds of the full body? And if it's the full body, if there's a vacancy, does it count the vacancy or not count the vacancy? Just whereas we define this as 8 members, because it's such a large thing, you would really need a supermajority to do it, appoint someone who was a counselor to a city position within 1 year. I'm trying to remember the reason for why we said 8 versus two-thirds, and I think that definition would help me.
I'm not certain. I assume it's two-thirds of the full body, but it's not. Is that what your question is?
Yes, so when we determine what the full body is, if there was a vacancy on the council, would we count 11, since there's a room for 11 on the council, or would we say 10? That's...
Attorney,
sure.
Yeah, if Attorney Barrett, you can come back to us on that one if we want to, like, because that's going to actually have implications further down the line. There's 3 or 4 other sections that deal with this particular subject, and so I think if we were to do some research on that, that will help us when we come across those, because there's a couple of more of those as we go down. Just from my 2 cents on this, I think it's great that we have a cooling off period, and it's actually rather rare that the cooling off period could be, the only place I've ever seen that the cooling off period could be legislatively removed is actually in the military currently. You can allow a general to become a civilian and with the action of the legislative body. I know the state government, due to the ethics, it's a 1-year cooling off period, and I don't think there's any action that can be taken, I think, unless there's an emergency measure, and I don't even know if it's legislative. So, but we can research that, because that will actually have some bearing as we go down the line. And I think it was more of a question, right? Councilor Peach, you didn't have any intended motion to make on that?
That's correct, Mr. President.
Okay.
I would like to keep it as the 8 members, where it's such a, as you stated, it's an act that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
And I would like, even if, regardless of the definition, 8 members to vote.
Yeah. And I believe state law also is implicated in some of this as well, because we all take the same ethics course every year. Any other questions on page 8? Councilor McGinn?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, that was, I was the one that brought this up in 2019. I see it as a construction issue, that it's referred to differently in the document. I'd prefer to see it changed to a 2/3 vote. And if I think the outstanding question that needs to be answered is it definitively of the full body? If we know that to be true based on what Attorney Barrett gets back to us on, we'll know that. If not, we could add the language here that it's of the full body. I'd just like to see the language be consistent throughout. So, Mr. President, do you want to leave this as kind of leave a hold on this one and come back to it, or do you want a motion now?
I would suggest we hold on it for now. So we would entertain is, just so we document it, that we would make a motion to request a legal advice from Attorney Barrett regarding Section 2-3 on page 8 with regards to the number of members to waive the 1-year cooling off period. If we get that motion, then we can get a memo from Attorney Barrett. Then it'll basically be a placeholder for us to come back, and we can deal with this issue at the next meeting.
No move, Mr. President.
All right, you heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilors Gould. Rozignol.
Yes.
Manning Martin. Peach.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache. Turco.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Okay. Any other discussion on page 8? All right, seeing none, we'll move to page 9. On page 9, we have 2-4, which is compensation. And moving to line 11, we have general powers. Line 15 is section 2-6, exercise of powers, quorum, rules, with the subsections A, exercise of powers, and B, quorum. Just as a point, I know we had discussed council pay. Councilor O'Neill had brought it up before as well, and this would identify it. That then it would then this would replace what we currently have for language in our charter for the process. Any councilors? Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. It does replace what we have, but it doesn't break the linkage with the mayor's salary. So if there's a desire to do something, I think the language needs to be introduced here. This was discussed at the 2019 meeting, and the feedback that we got from the Collins Center and the city clerk and the city solicitor at that time is that this language in and of itself does not break that linkage.
Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yep, to Councilor McGinn's point, this, because the way that our salary is linked now is through an ordinance, this does not rid that ordinance. We'd have to do that in a separate discussion, I suppose. I didn't know what the feel of the council, if they felt that this language was clean, if they understood it, how it's determined. You have to vote on a raise by a certain point in your term, and it's not effective until the next election is over. I felt from the last meeting there was some confusion on that, and I found some other language in another city charter that says the same thing, but it's a bit nicer.
Care to share that nicer language, Councilor?
Well, I didn't know if people were confused.
I mean, what I would do is just, if you want to offer it, and then we can.
Sure. So the proposed cleaner language I felt was the city council shall by ordinance determine an annual salary and expense allowance for councilors, but no ordinance establishing or increasing such salary or expense allowance shall be effective unless it is adopted within the first 18 months of the term of office and to be effective at the start of the next term of office. And then I would also include that it would need a 2/3 vote to pass.
Thank you, Councilor Peach. Any discussion from Councilor O'Neill?
Thank you, Mr. President. No, as you pointed out, I certainly wanted to make this part of the general discussion. I did not get a chance to craft a motion. Through you to Councilor Peach, I like that general language. My opinion is that as a councilor, we should be voting on our own raise, our own salary, and not have it linked to the mayor's pay as it is right now. I just would prefer to make sure that we have time to see that wording and digest it. Maybe that's just me. We could come back to this, but I just want to make sure that, like I said, I think it should be separated. That's my opinion, no matter what. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Neill. Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Councilor O'Neill. I think just the language here in the charter is very general. It doesn't specify whether or not we're linked to any other salaries. So I think the discussion would need to happen separately, which I believe was referred to this committee, to discuss the ordinance. So I don't know that here is the appropriate place to have that discussion, whereas we want this charter to survive for 30 years, and other councils may have different wills than us. So I agree that the salary shouldn't be linked, so you have my support when we come to that discussion, but I don't think here keeping the general language as general as possible so that this document lives and we don't have to go through this home rule petition process again if we wanted to change it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. And through you to Council Peach, great comments. Obviously, there may be a different will, but I just always said I'm not sure how we can do that. Where best, I thought we would bring it back as part of the charter review. I certainly have no problem eventually making an ordinance change, if you will, separately. I just want to figure out how best way to do it. So I'm open for suggestions in terms of separating them. I know we're dealing with the charter. I know it's a separate topic, but I just want to, and we also have other boards that we were going to talk about for salary. So however we can do that mechanic-wise, I'm open to that. Just want to make sure that that is addressed somehow. Thank you.
I'll just give you my 2 cents. I think that we have language in front of us. Unless anybody has a specific change they want to make in that language, I would be comfortable with keeping what we currently have. We can discuss the ordinances regarding other elected officials and salaries and how we process those requests and those changes. But unless we have a specific amendment, I would be happy to just keep this the way it is, unless anybody has a motion to amend it. Otherwise, I think we can move on. A lot of what I heard from Councilor Peach was just basically rewording it, which might require us to do a little bit further review down the line on it. But I'm happy with the language. Any other discussion on that? Councilor McGinn?
Thank you, Mr. President. So when the linkage, the salary linkage was referred to this committee, was that your expectation, Mr. President, that it be dealt separately as a discussion pertaining to the ordinance, or that it would be potentially a permanent change reflected in the charter? I'm just a little confused on that point. I may have misunderstood when it got referred to committee what the intent of that was.
Yeah, my intention was to have it, to at least discuss it, and to get the process, to kind of vet out what we want to do. Is this something we would handle within the charter? It sounds like it's an ordinance issue, more that we've researched it. I mean, we could put this in the charter theoretically, but I think that to me, it's because it's pay. We might want to look at it more of, I think what the charter would establish is the council would have the authority to change pay, and it would require a 2/3 vote. The specifics and the mechanics of doing that might be more appropriate for an ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. President. So through you to Councilor O'Neill, was it your intent to make this a permanent change? In which case it would be something you'd want to reflect in the charter, or is it something that you felt we should change near term and then allow future councils the flexibility of switching it back or to some other mechanism if that's their will going forward, as it was a question to you, Councilor O'Neill.
O'Neill?
Thank you, Mr. President. And through you, we certainly talked about it as just part of this process, but my thought, at least at this point in time, is not to put language into the charter in that it could, change as the will of the council does. I will certainly, move towards making a reference, or refer a motion to amend the ordinance to change the linkage between it. So I would not do anything in this particular charter review at this time, but I will certainly make the succinct answer would be I would do it separately as part of an ordinance change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Neill. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Thank you, Councilor McGinn. Any other discussion on page 9? Any other questions on page 9? All right, page 10. So page 10 starts off with subsection C, rules of procedure, and then moves on line 4I, regular meeting of the city council. I'm sorry, I1, subsection C1, which would be on line 4, and then line 9(2) regarding special meetings, line 3, it's just sessions of the subcommittees, and line 4, which would be page 10, line 21, regarding the clerk providing a record of each meeting. Just as a part of the discussion that was a couple years ago, we had line 6 was regarding the public comment section. That was a discussion point I remember from a few years ago that we moved to strike that. So I have it highlighted from a couple years ago, so I just wanted to make sure everybody brought it up. Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would make that motion to strike lines 5 through 8 on page 10. All regular meetings of the city council shall provide for a period of public comment, provided, however, the city council may promulgate rules and regulate the period of public comment as deemed appropriate. A comment on that motion. This was something I was definitely in favor of on the commission, but since joining the council, I see the methods that we have in place to provide for organized public comment. So as a ordinary Joe Schmo looking from the outside to the council, obviously I think, and all of us are in favor of more public comment, but the way that we do it now under our council rules, I think it's appropriate and it works well for what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Council Peach. I couldn't agree with you more, and I like how you came from one point of view and having experienced the council evolved into a completely different point of view that sees that this is not an us versus them type of thing. And so I appreciate you saying that. And I think just to compliment her remarks is that the city council has opportunity for the public to be heard during special permit hearings, during tax classification, and I don't think I've ever seen a committee chair ever not open things up to public discussion during committee meetings. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for the public to speak. And they can reach out to us as a representative form of government, as they do often. So I think there's ample opportunity for the public to be heard. So I support Council Peach's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Manning Martin. Councilor Gould and then Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also support Councilor Peach. I voted to not strike that from the charter last time, but I've thought about it, and we definitely have the opportunity for as a legislative body, for our constituents to give their opinions to us, and we welcome it. So I will be voting to strike that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gould. Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to briefly share the sentiments of those that have spoken already. I agree with Councilor Peach. In 6 years on the council, I've never seen a councilor deny somebody the ability to speak if they had requested, and we reserve that right to suspend the rules at any time to allow participation from a resident on an issue, and I don't recall it ever being an issue, so I would support the motion by Councilor Peach.
Thank you, councilors. Any other discussion on the motion? My only comment would be adding, now that we have technology has changed since 2019 in our process where we actually do allow people to call in via Zoom as well. So I think there's plenty of opportunity for participation. So seeing no other discussion, we'll take a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould. Rozignol.
No.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Peach. Yes. O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-1.
Okay. And we are still on page 10. Any other questions on page 10? Discussion. So we're on page 10. I'm going to move on to page 11. Page 11 has some carryover from subsection 4. This is regarding the promptness of minutes from meetings. That ends at page 11, line 6, moving on to and then on to section 2-7, access to information. We have subsection A, B, and C, and this is regarding requests for information. So we are on page 11. Councilor Peach. Oh, Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President, and through you to the clerk, I would just like to hear your opinion on the but not later than the next regularly scheduled meeting. I know sometimes we can have a special meeting a few days before a regular city council meeting, if that would cause issue. I do like to set guidelines for when information is available to the public, but I don't want to obviously put your office in a spot that they, if we give you rules that you can't follow.
Counselor, I just had that conversation with Counselor Melville very quickly, and he cited the verbiage reasonable promptness. Obviously, if we have back-to-back council meetings, such as in November when we have Thanksgiving, chances are you're not going to get the meeting minutes from the prior week, but, because that would be unreasonable.
Just as a point of like also regularly scheduled, so we do have these back-to-back meetings at some cases, and we will end up having 2 sets of council minutes. But Councilor Peach, did you have another question, or I'll move on to Councilor Turco? Councilor Turco.
Thank you. So it was the exact same question, but more in line, Madam Clerk, with the fact that we're using an outside stenographer now, right? That'll continue, that we're going to use an outside company to do the stenography? And does that delay you in any way?
My outside stenographer provides me a rough draft of the meeting within a few days, but I'm the one who actually prepares the minutes. So,
Okay,
I don't start them right away. I can't do anything until she gets them to me, and she gets them to me pretty quickly, but still, with the holiday or back-to-back, sometimes it's tough to get them prepared, and then also, I'm not in control of them being signed and sent back to my office for distribution, so.
Right, so I think, Mr. President, you already addressed that, so it's covered under a reasonable expectation, and then we'll be fine.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. Any other Councilor McGinn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think reasonable promptness does cover us, which is why I think we don't need this, but no later than the next regularly scheduled meeting. So I'd make that motion again. I move to strike from section 264, lines 2 and 3, page 11, the language, but no later than the next regularly scheduled meeting. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. It's to strike so Councilor McGinn, one more time, because I got it written down. I just want to make sure I'm correct.
Thank you, Mr. President. If you look at the review of the motions from the last 2019 session on the second page, it's the first motion. So we're moving to strike from section 2(6), subsection 4, lines 2 and 3, page 11, the language, but no later than the next regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay, you heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Okay, we are still on page 11. Any other questions on page 11? All right, we're going to move on to page 12. And 12 is a continuance of the discussion it's a continuance of page 11 regarding notices to be before the city council, and then it goes to appointments, section 2-8, appointments of the city council. 2-9 is ordinances and other measures. And then subsections A on the measures and B on emergency measures. So again, it's page 12. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under section 2-8, appointments of the city council, uh, the language contemplates staff, but it doesn't contemplate any actual appointments that are made by the city council to boards and commissions. So specifically, the city council makes appointments to the Community Development Authority and to the Community Preservation Committee. So I'd like to see a line added there that contemplates that. I'm not sure how to word that broadly, but I guess I'd request the city solicitor provide a language to contemplate the city council's appointments to certain boards in section 2.8. So moved.
Thank you, Councilman McGinn. Just a point of information for everybody under, when we get to page 14, you'll see council confirmation of certain appointments. That's specific to the mayoral appointments. These are not council appointments. I think that's what you're referring to, right, Councilman McGinn?
That's correct. I don't think they exist anywhere in here. So I think this is the place to capture it.
All right, we're going to go, thank you, Councilor McGinn. So there is a motion on the floor to get proper language that would be input there to follow that section. So I'm going to go Councilor Turco, then Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Councilor McGinn. Councilor, similar to the salary discussion with the mayor where the salaries are linked through ordinance, are these appointments by the city council also through ordinance mentioned elsewhere where we don't have to address it in the charter?
So, Mr. President, through you to Councilor Turco, it varies. The appointment to the Community Development Authority isn't contemplated anywhere in the city. That's captured in a state law, and the appointment to the Community Preservation Committee, I think, is in the bylaws of the Community Preservation Committee, not in any council rules. So I think under the charter, it would make sense just to acknowledge that there are a few appointments made by the city council and that's appropriate. I don't know that we need to specifically name them.
Councilor McGinn, one just as a point of information, Councilor, is like I think the differentiate from what you're talking about here versus what you're going to see in section 2-10 is nominate and appoint. Because some of these there's a section that deals specifically with mayoral nominations. We would be discussing not only appointments, but would be the nomination and appointments via just the council. Correct, Councilor McGinn? That's where you're going with this?
That's correct, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Thank you. Councilor Peach, then Councilor Manning Martin.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the motion, I would suggest that we change the title of the section. I think the title is misleading. Looking and comparing other city charters, this type of section, I believe, is meant just for more like employment. We can hire people. I would suggest changing the name of the section versus adding or changing anything within the section itself. I think as far as any boards or commissions that the council appoints people to, those are all under Mass General Law or other bylaws of other commissions that ask us to do that and should not reside in our city charter. And I don't think necessarily need to at all.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Peach. Did you have an idea, and we have a motion on the floor already, but did you have an idea what you wanted to rename it, or is that something kind of, I mean, I'm happy to bookmark this thing, because there's a motion on the floor about what kind of language we could use for the nomination and appointment to follow lines on line 11, but, if you have did you have a suggestion?
I would suggest that we change the name of the section to just refer to Yeah, I don't necessarily know how it works. We appoint the clerk in Peabody. Other cities have they list out the current staff that they do employ and then reserve the right to hire other staff.
Councilor Manning Martin.
Thank you. Good suggestion, Councilor Peach. And the fact of the matter is, line 10 does say the city council may employ staff as it deems necessary. So it's different from appointing to boards. So this is employment subject to appropriation. So I would like to point out that having that in our charter, we could, which I'm in favor of, having the city council hire an attorney for the city council, subject to appropriation, of course. So if we keep that language in there, the city council may employ staff as it deems necessary, we may be able to hire, as an example, an attorney specifically for the city council, which I do believe we need desperately. So I think cleaning up that title would probably clean that up a bit. So I think that's a good suggestion.
Thank you. Councilor McGinn, can you repeat your motion? And then we'll take a roll call vote on Councilor McGinn's motion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. So the motion was to request that the city solicitor add language that contemplates the appointments the city council may make to certain boards referenced in section 2.8.
All right, thank you, Councilor McGinn. We'll take a roll call vote.
Councilor Gould.
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry, is there further, I'm sorry, Councilor Manning Martin.
not discussion, just clarification. I'm confused still with the fact that we were talking about city council may employ, yet we're still using the word appointment, which was the title of the section, but Councilor Peach offered clarification to that. So I'm just confused at why we're talking about city council appointments. So I'm confused with the motion.
Councilor McGinn? Councilor, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Councilor Manning Martin. So yeah, I made my motion before Councilor Peach's comments. And I appreciate that changing the section name may help add clarity, but I see no reason why we can't capture both things in the same section. I agree that this section as written deals primarily with staff. And I also agree that if there was to be an attorney hired for the city council, this would be the place that would give the council the authority to do that. But I also see no reason to be silent on nominations and appointments to boards and commissions that the council has the authority to make. I find that in my tenure on the council, that's been somewhat vague, and I've never really understood why that is. And I think this is the right place to put it so that it's so that there's some structure to it.
Councilor
Thank you,
Manning
Mr.
Martin and Councilor Peach.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it. I'm just was hoping, even with your clarification, I understand your point and I respect it. I was hoping to keep these appointments and employment separate because we have so few employment. Right now we have, we hire the clerk and that's it. And I would like its own section so that we may be able to, as a board, expand upon that as we deem necessary for us to conduct our business with guidance, so that if we need to employ people, I'd like a separate section such as this, section 2.8. So I don't know if there's, I appreciate your concern. I don't know if there's another place where you can fulfill that in the charter, Pete. But I really had hoped to keep that separate because it's an important distinction to make between employment and appointments. Thank you.
Counselor McGinn, then Counselor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Councilman Matt. I have no problem with that suggestion. I would amend the motion to, rather than amending section 2.8 to create a new section that contemplates the nomination and appointment of to boards and commissions by the city council. So, Mr. President, same motion, just rather than editing the existing section, creating a new section.
Thank you, Counselor McGinn. Counselor Gould, then Counselor Peach.
Actually, Councilor Peach was before me.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Counselor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Counselor Gould. Through you to Counselor McGinn, I am not familiar with, aside from the few you pointed out, that the boards and commissions that the council makes appointments to, and it's my understanding that all of those appointments, they're not things that we set up. It's not that the council says we're going to appoint to this board. It's other boards saying the city council will make an appointment, or Mass General Law saying the city council will make an appointment. These boards and commissions may not exist in 50 years. They may not. I would not be in favor of specifying any appointments that we make that are not in the control of the city council. If there are boards within the city that we appoint to currently, I think that would be appropriate because that's something within the city of Peabody. But as far as commissions and boards that we appoint to based on Mass General Law or another board's bylaws, I don't think that's the place of the charter right now.
All right. Thank you, Counselor Peach. Counselor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Attorney Barrett has heard what we're looking for, and let's let Attorney Barrett go off and come back with a suggested section that covers all the appropriate discussion we've had. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion on the floor, and Counselor McGinn has referenced that a couple times. Any discussion? Any further discussion on the motion? Any further discussion on the motion? All set? All right. Seeing none, roll call vote.
Yes, I have discussion.
Counselor Gould.
The specific motion is what, please?
Counselor McGinn made a motion about adding language and then separating out the specific. Counselor McGinn, you want to just reiterate what your motion was one more time?
Sure, Mr. President. Requesting language from the city solicitor that contemplates appointments of the city council may make to certain boards. And the modified motion would be that this would be a new section. And on the motion, in response to the concern raised by Councilor Peach, it does not need to make specific reference to the Community Development Authority or to the CPC or any others, but just that authority exists, which I think again has been a point of ambiguity. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Counselor McGinn. We're going to go for a roll call vote.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Manny Martin. Peach.
No.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache. Turco.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 8-1.
Thank you. All right, we're still on page 12. Any other questions on page 12? All right. Seeing none, we're going to go on to page 13. Page 13 is a carryover on the emergency measures you'll see at the top, and goes to line 11 where it discusses a charter objection. So that's page 13. Any questions or comments on page 13? Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Certainly, I recall this one from when we originally kind of started going through these first two articles. I just don't see in general the need for having us have a charter objection in our charter. I think it will potentially slow down the council's work, and I don't think it needs to be in there, but I certainly would, maybe through you, maybe Councilor Peach might have some additional color from that. I feel bad asking her to respond with charter questions, but I guess if anyone else has additional information on why that would be part of our charter as opposed to council rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Neill. Yeah, I mean, I can speak on this as I deal with this regularly with specifically with select boards. It's kind of a firewall in case of, it's very rarely used, but it does not impact certain types of, not every item that's before the council would be impacted by a charter objection. So certain types of permit hearings that have timelines set by state law would not necessarily be impacted. So this is more of like an item that would become, but it's if you can, many cities and towns have adopted this kind of objection. Councilor, but anyway, that's just my 2 cents based on your question. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not sure that may be true in other municipalities, but as it's worded here, it's any measure. And the measure is a defined term in the definitions. So measure, any ordinance, order, other vote, or proceeding adopted, or which might be adopted by the city council or the school committee. So I mean, that's pretty broad. So you could have a charter objection on any, there's no limit to what type of measure it can be applied to with the language that we have here. So I'm not sure that that the limitations that you have experienced with this in other municipalities would apply if we were to adopt this language.
Thank you. Any other councilors? Councilor Turco?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I went back and forth on this also, and I actually ended up thinking I would be in favor of it. And reason being, I'm in favor of leaving this with the ability to have a charter objection, is discussion may ensue where whether through his or her fault or for whatever reason, they're not fully versed on the subject, and somebody calls for a vote, and they just don't feel comfortable voting for it at that minute and giving themselves additional time to read a document or to look at something. I think it's a good mechanism to have to ask for it. Now, granted, there is potential for abuse of it, and I don't know how to control that. But I think that any responsible counselor would refrain from regularly using a charter objection, and only in an instance where maybe a document didn't make sense or they didn't get a chance to thoroughly review a section that's being voted on.
Before Councilor Peach, to some of our senior councilors, have you ever seen a charter objection? I mean, this is a general question. I wasn't aware of it. Has anybody ever seen it when they're on the council? So everybody's answering no. Councilor Peach.
It doesn't
Thank you,
exist.
Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm in favor of keeping this charter objection in I think there's a protection for the abuse. First, this can only be brought and used on the first occasion that the question is brought to the council. So if we continue it from another hearing, you can't use the charter objection to continue it again. It also can only be used on the same subject matter once. So you can't just kick this can down the road continuously. Again, as President Melville said, this is in place in a majority of the municipalities in the Commonwealth and in other states as well. It's just a measure to protect. I mean, I think as a council, we have a lot of respect for each other, where if something is coming up and we ask to delay a vote, we usually give that courtesy to our fellow councilors. But this is, in here to protect. We're really writing this charter for not our current council, but for any council that moves forward. So when it's not as kumbaya as we are, this is a protection for maybe counselors who something's trying to be snuck in or, you know, done in the, you know, the dark rooms and brought to the council without a lot of time. So I'd be in favor of keeping this in the charter.
Thank you, Councilor Peach. Councilor O'Neill and then Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I appreciate hearing other councilors' opinion about this. You know, I just look at it, in my opinion, you know, to Councilor Peach's comments, it does talk about it, that it can only be brought once on a specific matter. My concern is that it in the future, or maybe not this council or future, is that it becomes an ability to you know, withhold a vote, and we're here to make decisions. I don't think we've not had a situation where we've had to use it, so I think it just potentially could be abused, even if it's on a single matter by fellow councilors. So I would move to strike it. I certainly want to hear Councilor McGinn's comments before making that motion. Thank you.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually no comment. I just, you had asked a question as to whether anybody has any experience with this on the council. Did I hear that correctly, Mr. President?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor, if you do.
Well, I mean, we don't, the provision doesn't exist today, so there would be no city of Peabody experience with this, right?
I believe we have a charter objection. We do. I remember reading it. I'd have to double check, Council. I don't have it in front of me, but that was actually one of the reference. That's why I asked, because I believe we do have it. I don't think I've ever seen it used. Councilor Turco?
My apologies, just because you're discussing whether there is one or isn't one. There was a motion at the prior meeting to get an opinion from the city solicitor on this. Did we get an opinion, or do we have it on file?
No, we have nothing on that.
Oh, that's why we should have a city council attorney.
Do I still have the floor, Mr. President?
Councilor McGinn.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of an important point. We're saying, well, it's never had to be used before. I'm in my opinion, it doesn't exist at the moment. So, I mean, that might be a good thing to know. If it's going to weigh on how people might vote on this. However, there's a motion on the floor, Mr. President, so I'll defer.
Councilor O'Neill has made his motion, but I'll go to Councilor O'Neill for his motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess my motion would be to see if we could get not at this meeting, for the next meeting, get a response from the city solicitor regarding the motion to get is there actually a charter objection in current council rules? And if so, what is the specific wording? So moved.
Heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Councilor O'Neill. Councilor McGinn on the motion.
Yeah, on the motion, through you to Councilor O'Neill. Councilor O'Neill, you mentioned in council rules. Would you amend that to in the current charter? Because I mean, that's all that really.
Councilor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I'd be agreeable to amending that, certainly. Yeah, I want to make sure we capture it anywhere it might be.
Thank you, Councilor O'Neill. So we have a motion on the floor. Councilor Peach, did you want to comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I think that it's obviously not called a charter objection, but a similar provision exists in our council rules currently. I think that's where we're thinking of it.
Okay.
There is a provision somewhere that allows us to do this.
All right, well, that's what part of the motion of Councilor McGinn is, to get clarity on that. Any discussion? We'll do a roll call vote.
Councilor Gould?
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
Thank you. Rozignol?
Yes.
Kenny Martin?
Yes.
Peach? O'Neill?
Yes.
McGinn?
Yes.
Gamache?
No.
Turco?
Yes.
Melville?
Yes. All right. Thank you, Councilor. I think that's a going to be a helpful motion, since we made it a couple years ago too, so it's good to finally close that off. All right, so we're still on page 13. Is there any other comments or questions for page 13? All right, moving on to page 14. So this is the last portion of Article 2. So we have Section 2-10, which is the City Council confirmation of certain appointments. This is what we were referring to earlier. And then on line 8, we have Section 2-11, filling of vacancies. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we're not going to get there tonight for sure, but as you look ahead to the section on the mayor, when we talk about filling the vacancies, there's language that talks about compensation, and there's no language regarding compensation for councilors that might be appointed to fill vacancies. And I don't think that should be left ambiguous. And I think we should be consistent if we're going to contemplate compensation for a temporary mayor. We should contemplate compensation for a temporary councilor. So that I had made that motion in 2019, and I make it again this evening, that the request that the city solicitor add language for compensation in section 211, filling vacancies for the city council. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn regarding language of filling vacancies with regards to compensation. Any discussion? Councilor Peach?
Thank you, Mr. President. I know that this was discussed with the last council. I think the difference and why it's not included or was not included, and I don't think it makes any difference if we do include it, but this is a non-elected official being appointed to a position that is salaried, whereas the vacancy of the mayor is filled with the council president, who's an existing city employee, so there needs to be a change in their compensation. So that's why it's specifically defined in the vacancy of the mayor and not in the appointment of a non-city council or other elected official to the council vacancy. So just as clarification, that's why it's not in there.
Thank you. So we still have a motion on the floor. Any more discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilors Gould. Yes. Rozignol. Yes. Manning Martin.
Yes.
Peach. O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Is there any other questions or comments on page 14? Any other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none. It's just a couple of comments from me regarding tonight. So one thing, we will have some unfinished business from tonight to follow into the next meeting. So Attorney Barrett will provide the memos along with the clerk will make the edits that we have voted on, and then we will take the language or memos from Attorney Barrett, and we can incorporate those. We'll do those votes right away at the next meeting on this, and then we will take up the next article, which would be Article 3 and Article 4. Based on just what's going to be in Article 3 and Article 4, I can't imagine us getting through both of them, but I would prefer to have both of them on the schedule along with this unfinished business, so if we do we can start at least chipping into Article 4, if that makes sense. By the way, this is a great meeting. I think this is the way we're going to be doing it. I wanted to have this meeting to kind of understand how we would be formulating, and I think it is good to use the city solicitor to come back with memos so that we can then vote on in the future so that we get the language right, and that we can bookmark certain items to research and get back on. There's a lot of information here. So with that being said, any other questions from councilors, comments? Seeing none, Councilor Rosendahl.
Thank you. Do we have a date on our next meeting of the whole for sections 3 and 4?
I don't have a date yet. I was actually going to talk to Allison and Attorney Barrett to find out what their timeline was. They've been, by the way, everybody's been fantastic in meetings and whatnot, so very thankful.
And your intent is to keep it on off nights, correct?
Yeah, I think it's best, right? I mean, just based on tonight, I don't see how we could do this before a regular meeting. My goal is to keep them to an hour and 45 minutes to an hour and a half, no later, so.
Perfect. Motion to recess.
All right, motion to adjourn, so moved. All in favor, any opposed? It's a vote. We are recessed, thank you.